The California sun turned the grinder into a frying pan, heat rising through boots and skin. Boat crews prowled the asphalt like restless animals, their jittery energy settling on the lone figure standing at the center. She wore baggy gray PT shorts and a plain navy t-shirt, nothing distinctive. Nothing that marked her as belonging there. A whistle sliced through the air. Master Chief Navarro stood with his arms crossed like a barricade, amusement curling his mouth. "Commissary's that way, ma'am. These aren't yoga mats. Find proper gear before you get hurt." The laughter that followed was thin and desperate Chung men aligning themselves with authority. Sand kicked up as boots shifted and elbows nudged. Mockery echoed across the grinder. She didn't move. Her feet stayed planted, posture relaxed, eyes steady. From the catwalk above, Captain Rowan Hale leaned forward, studying her stance. The calm way she blinked grit from her lashes. Something about it stirred an old memory. Without a word, she turned and walked towards Supply. Leaving silence in her wake, the next morning dawned under the same harsh Coronado glare. A white heat that sharpened every edge of the base. The grinder was already a live-eye BS raft scraping across blistered asphalt, instructors shouting over the surf's distant rhythm, the metallic bite of CLP riding the breeze. Gulls fought over the bay beyond the fence, while jets from North Island cracked the sky. Comfort had no currency here. Lieutenant Commander Mara Ellison moved through it all like a ghost in daylight. Her presence was deliberately understated. No ribbons, no warfare pins. Officially, she was an evaluator auditing safety and logistics for naval special warfare. Unofficially, her orders carried more weight. After a string of preventable training injuries, Command wanted insight from someone who had lived where minor errors turned fatal. EOD knew that terrain well. The request was simple. Help us lose fewer people before combat ever begins. To the candidates baking under the sun, none of that mattered. To them, she was staff another outsider, another clipboard from the Pentagon hive. No trident, no whispered nickname. Just a gray shirt and a notebook tucked under her arm. Beside the muscled bodies hauling rafts, she seemed insignificant. In a culture that worshipped motion, her stillness became an invitation. Candidate Parker took it first. Leaning on his oar, he smirked. "Tour guide's back," he muttered loud enough for others to hear. "Maybe she'll show us where the commissary's hiding." Snickers rippled through the line, not for the joke itself, but for what it signaled. Belonging. Alignment. Mara didn't react. She logged Parker's voice, his cadence, the way others mirrored him. Every environment had pressure points, some buried in the ground, others lodged in fragile egos. She'd learned long ago that the loudest man rarely stayed upright when things went dark. Candidate. Alvarez noticed she stood uncovered in the heat. "Sir, Mamu, need a sweat stop?" "It's brutal." Parker jabbed him with an elbow. Mara inclined her head politely. "I'm fine. Thank you." She didn't need protection from the sun. Not today. Navarro watched it all with the seasoned. I have a man who'd seen classes break against the grinder for decades. He believed he was guarding standards, forging resilience. But his sharpened humor gave shelter to immaturity that thrived in mob laughter. He thought he was building toughness. In truth, he was feeding a culture where ridicule ran unchecked until it met something immovable. Mara stood balanced, notebook still closed. The candidates thought she was watching them. In reality, she was mapping risk. Sun angle. Cracks in the asphalt. The echo off the pool tiles. Salt, rubber, with splinters along the OR rails. An EOD mind never stopped cataloging threats. She counted distances without meaning to. 5 steps to water. 23 to the gear cages. 14 to the flagpole's shadow. Her fingers brushed a coin in her pocket-an old habit. One turn, then another. The ritual steadied her. A scar tugged beneath her sleeve as she shifted. She kept it covered, though California light had a way of finding what people tried to hide. A memory surfaced, uninvited desert night, half moon, the faint click of a pressure plate arming beneath packed dirt. The stillness before detonation. She pushed it away. Memories were landmines too. The heat thickened as training rolled on. Log PT carries. Flutter kicks on salt-crusted asphalt. Sweat and oil and sea spray fouled the air. Mara observed from the margins, never interrupting. Navarro eventually stalked over. "Ellison," he barked. "This grinder doesn't care about reports. Out here, it's pain or progress. Don't confuse the two." She met his stare calmly. "I understand, Master Chief. I'm here for one reason: fewer folded flags." The words dropped heavy. Motion slowed. Even laughter faltered. Parker broke it with a chuckle. "Guess that's one way to say you're taking notes?" The snickers returned, quieter now by mid-morning. Her tasking was set. Observe grinder, PT log PT, then pool evaluations. No interventions. Just documentation. She accepted it without complaint, falling in behind the cadre. Jet fuel mingled with bay brine as candidates marched ahead, laughter draining away under the weight of the day. The first real incident came before dawn. The next morning, Mara opened her locker to find it stripped bare. Uniform gone. Notebook gone. In their place, a sheet of lined paper taped neatly inside. "Observer, observe this." She read it once, then folded it and slipped it into her pocket. No reports. No confrontation. She pulled spare PTs from her duffel, laced her boots, and walked back to the grinder. By the time she arrived, training was already in full roar. Parker made a show of scuffing sand against her legs as he passed. "Oops." Laughter followed sharper, more uneasy. Some candidates looked away. Mara brushed the grit off and resumed watching. Log PT brought fresh taunts. "Corners open, ma'am?" Parker sneered. "Want to carry real weight?" "Not my place, candidate," she replied evenly. Navarro's frustration mounted as Parker's crew faltered under the load. Mara tracked every slip, every strain. Pride had no place in her calculus. Rumors spread by the pool. PowerPoint officer? No blast suit. No scars worth counting. Mara heard them and said nothing, her eyes catching a loose strap near the waterline instead. Late afternoon, Navarro voiced what many were thinking. "Lieutenant Commander Watt, exactly are you learning here?" "I'm here to reduce folded flags," she answered calmly. Silence followed, heavy and unfamiliar. Laughter returned, but it carried doubt now. Curiosity replaced mockery in a few eyes. Alvarez lingered closer. Navarro studied her with something colder than disdain. By day's end, Mara had never raised her voice or defended herself. Yet the grinder felt different. Unease crept where certainty once lived. Midweek, the heat turned vicious. Captain Hale paced the catwalk, tracking rhythm and drift. He noticed Mara's movements, subtle, deliberate. During a break, light caught the edge of a coin. She turned absently in her palm. Worn, scarred, an anchor half erased. A fragment of Latin, not a trophy coin. He'd seen one like it once framed beside a folded flag. Below, laughter came in short, uncertain bursts. When Mara passed, it faded. She taped her forearm with practiced precision load management, not vanity. Hale recognized the method instantly. This wasn't theory. This was survival. And whatever test the grinder thought it was running, it was no longer one-sided. Asterisk curiosity wrestled with manners. "You, heard something, ma'am?" "An old issue," she replied, smoothing the tape, her voice even. Even tape needs to be reminded who's in charge. He nodded as if he understood. When he returned to his crew, his posture had shifted just a fraction. That was how respect moved quietly. Without announcement, they transitioned to the pool as the sun climbed higher, glare exploding off the water like shards of glass. Chlorine hung thick over the tang of salt, and the aluminum ladders burned hot enough to bite bare skin. Instructors stacked LRV rebreathers in a corner, rubber squeaking softly, buckles clicking in low rhythm. A safety diver seated a mouthpiece and reached for a mask hand somewhere in that ordinary motion. A sound slipped through the noise. A faint hiss, like sand leaking through clenched fingers. Most would never notice it. Hale barely did. Mara did. Her breath caught for a heartbeat, head angling almost imperceptibly toward the unit. Her eyes narrowed, focused, but she didn't call attention to it. She didn't point. She let the diver discover it himself. 2 heartbeats later, his hands were already correcting an O-ring that hadn't fully seated. The hiss vanished. No drama, no spectacle. Hale stored the moment away. Identifying a bad oxygen mix by sound wasn't something learned in a classroom. Whispers skimmed the pool deck. Policy fix. PowerPoint queen. The words drifted, then folded shut when Mara passed. She paused to reset a loose fin strap, slid it cleanly into its keeper, and moved on without comment. The small, precise adjustments of someone who measured danger in millimeters. Later, the course shifted to the O course. Sunlight hammered the high rails until heat shimmered above the splintered wood like a mirage. Boots thudded. Shoes squealed. The air smelled of old sweat and baked pine resin, sealed into the grain by decades of summers. Hale tracked Mara across the lanes. She watched hands, not faces. When a candidate reached for a rail with slick palms, she shifted to check his feet instead of staring at the potential fall. When he slipped and recovered, she released a tiny breath, relief disguised before it could be seen. Time stretched. Shadows crawled like a sundial across the grinder. Gulls settled beyond the fence, picking at the water near the pilings. A patrol car rolled to a stop by the chain link. An Iraqi liaison officer stepped out with a Navy translator, his gestures restrained, his eyes worn with gratitude or exhaustion. Mara approached slowly, deliberately non-threatening. She matched his pace, hands visible, chin lowered slightly in greeting. Then she spoke in soft, fluent Gulf Arabic, not with a rehearsed pleasantry, but with specificity. She asked about his mother's medicine, about whether the baby slept better since the crib was moved away from the stove. The officer blinked, then smiled, an unguarded smile pulled from deeper than courtesy. He answered quietly. Respect carried in posture rather than volume. The translator stepped back, unnecessary. It lasted only a few sentences. No performance. No audience. Yet nearby candidates exchanged confused looks, sensing an intimacy they couldn't place. They didn't connect the dots. Mystery protects itself by arriving in pieces. On the catwalk, Hale leaned against the rail, the worn edge of her coin replaying in his thoughts. Pace, not speed, but peace. The anchor curve tugged at memory. A shape hovered just out of reach. A cross. A wreath. Wings that weren't wings. Below, laughter had thinned to stray chuckles that died midair. Mara's presence quieted it not by force, but because she noticed mistakes the way musicians hear wrong notes. You don't heckle a tuning fork. During a reset, she stood in the narrow shade of the equipment cage, flexed her taped hand, released it, then rolled the coin again without looking. Muscle memory handled that while her eyes tracked a loose sling tail near a ladder rung. She stepped in, tucked it away, stepped back, no more noticeable than straightening an item on a shelf. Thanks, the candidate said automatically. She nodded and moved on. Hale watched, trying to convince himself he was imagining patterns. The explanation didn't hold. The coin wasn't a pattern, it was a receipt. The tape wasn't fashion, it was an answer to blast physics. The flinch at the hiss wasn't nerves, it was recognition. The Arabic wasn't memorized, it was carried by afternoon. The bass fell briefly quiet, the way heavy machinery does before spinning up again. Candidates split into 2 kinds. Those watching her to confirm a story they wanted. And those watching to learn one they didn't yet understand. Her shadow stretched to the flagpole. The coin caught light, then dulled, as if it preferred anonymity. The remedial pool session followed, the one everyone dreaded. A knot-tying drill at depth, simple in theory, brutal in reality. Alvarez stood rigid at the edge, mask trembling in his hands. Navarro loomed nearby, daring him to fail. Alvarez pushed off. For a moment, he was fine, then panic bloomed, thrashing, clawing, the mask slipping as fear and water hit together. The nearest safety diver was occupied. There was a half-second of paralysis to space, where hesitation becomes catastrophe. Mara didn't hesitate. She stripped her shirt, tied her hair in one clean motion, flashed a palm-down signal, and entered the pool like a blade. No splash, no waste. She rotated Alvarez with practiced precision, secured his airway, surfaced, and delivered to crisp rescue breaths before signaling the deck. On the tiles, she checked his pulse, flipped his mask, and spotted the hairline tear near the skirt. She handed him a spare. "This one seals," she said quietly. "Yours doesn't. Bad seal means seal buildup. Panic hits faster." Alvarez nodded, shaking. The silence afterward was heavier than any mockery. Navarro's eyes narrowed, calculating. Then an instructor began assembling a Dreiger unit. A hiss slipped out. "Check your O-ring seating," Mara said, almost casually. He did. She was right. No speech followed. No claim. She put her shirt back on and returned to the pool edge. Competence, nothing more, nothing less. The balance had shifted. Everyone felt it. Later, storm clouds rolled in. Hale stepped down from the catwalk. "Walk with me." As they moved along the fence line, the coin turned in her hand. The engraving caught the light Paradis in pace, prepared in peace. An EOD emblem woven with a naval special warfare crest. Hale recognized it. Only 5 had ever been made. "Were you the EOD officer at Route Cyan?" he asked quietly. She paused. "We had men on a call-out," she said. The triggerman was patient. That was enough. Navarro approached, candidates trailing behind him. Hale didn't soften his voice. "Master Chief, you owe Lieutenant Commander Ellison an apology?" Silence crashed down. Mara stepped back slightly. "Everyone went home because people did their jobs," she said. "That's all." Navarro's voice finally came. "Candidates, retrieve her belongings."
Ow.
They ran. Returned with her gear. Set it down without meeting her eyes. "Thank you," she said simply. Later, she demonstrated safety setup taping slings, securing chem lights, explaining heat prep. Alvarez asked questions. She answered plainly, from experience. At last, Navarro stepped forward and saluted. Slowly, the candidates followed. The mockery was gone. What remained was honor. As dusk fell, Mara laced her boots on the steps by the cages. Alvarez quietly wrapped green tape around his cantina small. Private acknowledgement, she nodded once. That night, Bitch wrote a memo. Dry, technical, useful, no mention of theft or salutes. Just corrections that would keep people alive. When she left, the coin caught the last light, then disappeared into her pocket. Strength doesn't shout. It checks seals. It tapes straps. It listens for the hiss. And because of that, someone else gets to go home.